Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going deep into one of the coldest and most shocking battlefield events of the war. What happened in that frozen stretch of land was not an accident and not a simple weather problem. It was a perfectly calculated trap, prepared with patience, timing, and an understanding of how to use nature as a weapon. Ukraine turned a brutal snowstorm into a battlefield advantage, and Russia walked directly into a nightmare that their commanders never saw coming. What unfolded next was devastating, and the scale of losses shocked even military analysts who have followed this war from the very beginning. The entire situation began with a sudden and violent shift in the weather, when a fast-moving Arctic front pushed across the region. Temperatures dropped sharply, visibility collapsed, and dense snow swallowed the battlefield. Ukrainian forces had been monitoring satellite updates and weather models for days, waiting for the exact moment when the storm would reach its peak. Their strategy depended on the blizzard not just hiding their movements, but completely blinding the Russian convoy that was advancing through an exposed route. Ukrainian commanders knew that Russian units tend to stick to rigid movement schedules, even in dangerous conditions, and this rigidity became the key to their downfall. As the storm thickened, the Russian convoy began pushing deeper into the region. The roads became slippery, vehicles slowed down, and communication systems started to malfunction. The soldiers inside the armored vehicles could barely see anything outside the windows. Snow hammered the metal plating, engines strained, and the convoy stretched farther and farther apart, creating gaps that Ukrainian reconnaissance units were carefully tracking. What Russia believed was simply a harsh weather delay was actually the first stage of a carefully orchestrated trap. Ukrainian drones, modified with thermal systems and storm-resistant stabilizers, were already in the sky. They hovered above the storm clouds, using heat signatures to monitor every movement below. These drones could see what Russian soldiers could not. They identified the lead vehicles, the vulnerable supply trucks, and the slower armored carriers struggling to keep formation. Ukrainian commanders had prepared multiple attack teams, each positioned along different choke points. Once the convoy was fully inside the blizzard zone, the trap snapped shut. Ukrainian artillery teams, positioned miles away, began firing guided shells using coordinates transmitted directly from the drones. The snowstorm muted the sound of incoming shells, leaving the Russian troops with almost no warning. The first explosions tore into the front vehicles, blocking the road and forcing the entire column to stop. The rear vehicles could not move either due to the icy terrain, turning the convoy into a long immobile target. Ukrainian ambush squads approached from both sides, using the storm as concealment. They moved silently and with confidence, while the Russian soldiers struggled to even identify where the attack was coming from. The panic inside the convoy grew rapidly. Radios were freezing, engines were stalling, and soldiers were slipping on the icy ground as they attempted to take positions. The snowstorm made it impossible for them to coordinate or retreat. Ukrainian anti-armor teams targeted the vehicles stuck in the center of the formation, while the artillery continued hammering positions in the rear. Explosions were barely visible through the thick snow, but the heat signatures on Ukrainian drone screens made everything perfectly clear. Russia had no idea how accurately they were being tracked. As more strikes landed, the Russian convoy began splitting apart. Some units tried to move off the road, but the snow was too deep, and vehicles quickly became immobilized. Others attempted to reverse, but the narrow route and intense storm made maneuvering nearly impossible. Ukrainian snipers positioned on ridgelines took advantage of their thermal scopes, hitting key personnel who were trying to coordinate a response. Every attempt at regrouping collapsed under the weight of the storm and the precision of the ambush. At this stage, Ukrainian drone operators switched from reconnaissance to attack mode. Small explosive drones descended through the storm clouds and targeted damaged vehicles, ammunition trucks, and communication vehicles. Every hit increased the chaos. Ukrainian teams also cut off the convoy's supply routes, ensuring no reinforcements could reach the area. The entire battlefield became a frozen trap that Russia had no tools to escape from. The psychological shock on Russian troops was severe. Soldiers trapped in the blizzard reported that they could hear explosions but couldn't determine their direction. The storm made every sound echo, creating confusion and fear. Many soldiers abandoned their vehicles, seeking cover in the snow, but this only made them more vulnerable to Ukrainian advance teams. Thermal drones detected every movement, identifying soldiers hiding behind destroyed vehicles or lying in snowbanks. Ukraine used small-caliber precision weapons to neutralize isolated groups without wasting resources. Meanwhile, the snowstorm itself was damaging equipment. Electronics froze, diesel engines struggled to ignite, and optics became covered with ice. Russian soldiers who tried to clear their scopes found the lenses fogging instantly. Their night vision gear became useless, while Ukrainian teams used specially adapted lenses designed to function in freezing conditions. Every technological disadvantage worsened the situation for the Russian troops, turning the battlefield into a place where they could neither see nor fight effectively. Hours into the ambush, Ukrainian armored units joined the operation. Tanks and armored carriers moved in slowly from the southern approach, using pre-mapped paths to avoid getting stuck in snowdrifts. These units provided the final crushing pressure, hitting the remaining vehicles and eliminating pockets of resistance. Russia attempted to call for air support, but the blizzard made flying impossible. The storm that Ukraine used as a weapon turned into a natural defense shield that blocked any Russian response. By the time the storm began to weaken, the damage was already irreversible. The convoy was destroyed along several kilometers of frozen road. Burned vehicles steamed in the cold air, ammunition boxes exploded under drifting snow, and abandoned equipment was scattered everywhere. Ukrainian forces moved in cautiously, securing documents, capturing surviving soldiers, and collecting intelligence from communication systems and destroyed vehicles. The scale of the ambush became clear as soon as the drone footage was reviewed. Russia had lost far more than expected, not only in equipment but in strategic morale. What shocked analysts most was the level of preparation behind the attack. Ukraine had timed every phase perfectly, using weather data, drone intelligence, terrain familiarity, and coordinated ground teams to create an ambush that worked like a machine. This was not a random battlefield win. It was one of the most successful examples of combining natural conditions with modern warfare. Military observers called it a masterclass in asymmetric tactics, where a smaller force uses intelligence and adaptability to crush a larger mechanized enemy. For Russia, the consequences were deeper than equipment losses. Commanders began questioning movement protocols during storms. Soldiers became increasingly fearful of traveling in convoys, and communication breakdowns became a topic of heated discussion. The ambush shattered the belief that Russia could rely on heavy armor regardless of conditions. It exposed how quickly an entire operation can collapse when the enemy understands the terrain better. It also showed that weather, often seen as a disadvantage, can become a powerful weapon when used strategically. Ukraine's confidence grew after the ambush. The success strengthened morale among frontline units and proved that precision, timing, and intelligence can change the entire course of a battle. The operation was studied by NATO analysts, who praised the efficiency and coordination displayed by Ukrainian teams. It demonstrated that even in the harshest conditions, when equipment is strained and visibility is nearly zero, a disciplined and well-prepared force can deliver overwhelming results. As the story of the frozen ambush spread, it became symbolic of the wider conflict. It represented the differences in strategy, preparation, and battlefield adaptability between the two sides. It showed that modern warfare is no longer just about tanks and numbers, but about how smartly a force can use every element available, including the weather. And in this case, Ukraine turned a deadly blizzard into a precision weapon that crushed a convoy Russia believed was safe. This frozen nightmare was more than a battlefield success. It was a message that Ukraine will strike when the enemy least expects it, in any condition, on any terrain, and with strategies that break traditional rules. It was a reminder that even the strongest armored columns can become helpless when caught in the perfect trap. And it was proof that in this war, intelligence and agility can outweigh raw power.